There are always going to be a few fundamental truths in Rainbow Six Siege. Claymore insurance is always worth the price of admission. Jackal shall be permanently banned, and throwing a Samsung Galaxy Note 7 up a hatch is always a good idea. However, as I've said around 100 times before, the way to win games isn't to play in a reasonable way, but rather to appear as if you've lost all semblance of your ability to think rationally. Most players may think that alibis decoys would be absolutely detrimental to attacking players attempting to win the game, but Siege, more than most titles, is very much about exploiting your enemy's fear of getting killed, their ambitions for the top spot on the scoreboard, and their absolute lust of satisfying both at the same time. Players are so quick to convince themselves that a slight chance to score an easy kill is worth such an elevated level of risk that all you need to do is give them a slight push to do so before you ever so effortlessly crush their dreams. What's even better is that the more the enemy team perceives the odds to be stacked in their favor, the more likely they are to make terrible decisions, because although they may have just seen their own comrades try and spectacularly fail to achieve the intended outcome, they just can't help themselves but give in to that internal yearning for glory. You don't even need to be a particularly good player for this to work, rather the understanding that humans are flawed creatures that absolutely fucking love making the same mistakes over and over. If you bank on the fact that your calculated brain damage will always overcome their generic brand of stupidity, you'll always come out on top. This isn't to say that there aren't pretty hard limits to what you can get away with in this mentality. Always remember that the best laid plans will consistently fall apart if the enemy lacks the same previously mentioned level of rationality. The golden rule for 900 IQ strategies is that they always crumble when facing 9 IQ enemies. The easiest way to win on Siege, and arguably the entire point of the game, is to add variables to a situation that your enemy either hasn't prepared for or doesn't have the knowledge to effectively counter. Everyone knows the classic but effective Thatcher and Thermite dream team, but players are usually able to compose themselves relatively well under this familiar change of conditions. However, some strategies, like getting an entire team to pack smokes, simply doesn't have an established contingency plan, because what kind of psychopathic team would try such a dumb shit strategy? Having any amount of vision is a factor that won't usually cross the mind of a defending player, and when you challenge this assumption, they often won't be able to formulate a response to your already carefully considered plan. One such variable that will always change the way enemies play is throwing a shield into the mix, and as I've already made an entire guide on Monty, it's time for Blitz to have his time in the sun. It's hard to deny that from pretty much all characters in this game, the Blitz playstyle might be one of the hardest and arguably the most different from all other operators. The Blitz experience is fucking unforgiving for both the enemy team, but very often the player themselves, meaning that it'll often be difficult to determine the outcomes of many matchups until you know the competency of each player on their role. With this being said, there are a few fundamental rules that can carry you most of the way. The first rule is the acceptance that oftentimes you're going to be killed by forces of nature completely outside this realm of existence. You'll often be attributing around 20% of all deaths to shit that seems as if people are shooting directly through your shield, or bullets bending harder than Goyo, bending my sexuality. With this being said, stairs are absolute fucking death traps and should be avoided if ever possible. In fact, any level of elevation that the enemy has over your position will almost certainly lead to your untimely demise. The second rule is knowing when to actually aim. In general, you should never let your enemy see you aim down sights, as something seems to be hard-coded into their evolutionary makeup that forces them to spray wildly at your location. Instead, you should either flash them to remove their vision, or once you know an enemy is looking at you, aim before you peek a corner. This, more than anything, might be the most important thing to know about playing Blitz. Many professional players also swear by the laser sights when using this operator, but it still feels as if you're shooting in any random 360-degree direction. The third rule is knowing how to flash. A lot of players don't know that as long as you're within 4 meters of someone, they don't even have to be looking at you to lose their eyesight completely, and while it's fun to see enemies panic in response, it's so much funnier when done to a teammate.
Cameron, don't. Fucking hell, you Alright. For fuck, Cameron, don't. Cameron, for fuck's sake. Cameron, for fuck's sake, you little fucking do it for a... Fuck off, Cameron.
Once you flash a person, their fight or flight reflex quite literally kicks in, as they'll either make the split-second decision to knife, or pepper you with bullets, or attempt to cheese it across the map. Once you make the flash, it's important to first find out what the fuck they plan to do with their last few seconds alive, as running usually gives you a perfect opportunity to give them a free lead injection, but if they decide to fight, you'll want to wait a second before their panic bullets are all used up, so you can more carefully go in for the easy kill. Trying to predict what a person will do once their vision is taken away is effectively impossible, and sometimes death before dishonor very much factors into their decision-making process. If all goes well, however, it may not even be necessary to fire a shot, as your presence might be menacing enough to let a competent teammate get a nice angle while the enemy is still trying to figure out whether or not you're a real threat. The last thing to know for Blitz is that you'll want to avoid any and all situations involving explosives, because you'll only end up hurting yourself. You'll instead want to isolate enemies into compact and exploitable spaces. When this isn't always possible, just go back to the old bullshit smoke method and make your own form of isolation. Most times the fear of the unknown makes it just as effective as trapping them in a room. Enjoy the easiest kills of your fucking life. The other shield operators are nowhere fucking near this hard to use. Just point your most cracked player in the right direction and let them feast on the corpses of the enemy team. Perhaps one of the most obvious, overpowered, and underused strategy in Siege is to have a dedicated drone operator to scope out rooms ahead of the main party going in. The most obvious reason as to why no one does this is because in a game where you're not actually in combat 95% of the time, players are mighty hesitant to give up their precious dopamine hit from scoring a winning kill. However, for players more concerned with getting Ws, this might be one of the easiest ways to do so, even if it sometimes means carrying from the bottom of the scoreboard. You just need to ask yourself if you want 100 points from some of the kills, or 50 points from every kill. In terms of the soft yellow ping versus the hard red ping debate, I'm personally all about Team Red. This is because absolutely no one can possibly confuse it with any other command. It strikes the fear of Lord Shankar in the enemy, and if your teammate can't win the matchup while being assisted with the constant real-time location of the enemy, then they probably weren't going to win the fight anyway. On defense, however, players who are inclined to carry from the comfort of a nice hiding spot will want to get good at Maestro, because unless you're one of those cracked motherfuckers who have somehow figured out how to let their brain directly interface with the Ubisoft servers themselves, this Italian stallion is going to absolutely ruin your day. The trick to Maestro is laying his cameras outside of an objective, which is ideally the opposite way an enemy player will be wanting to look. Once an enemy tries to take an innocent peek into the objective, you'll want to then spam them with pings and light them up like Emperor Palpatine whenever you think you can get away with doing so. This once again comes back to exploiting the fear of an enemy, which is only heightened with every hard ping and every time they are lit up by your bullshit gadget. A lot of the time players who very much have the means to destroy your camera will choose not to do so, because getting hard pinged for your entire team is often way more intimidating than a gadget that can slowly but ever so surely chip away at your health. Enemies often need to make the very regrettable choice of either making a risky push into an objective, staying at the door, and getting grinded down, or simply abandoning that particular entrance entirely, which just buys you even more time. Although you can certainly score kills with these cameras of death, you'll mostly be taking the career path of a Facebook content moderator who is forced to watch hours upon hours of people getting murdered for a minimum wage place on the scoreboard. However, when you need a change in your vocation, Maestro's bullshit sniper rifle of a shotgun will get the job done, as well as his defense LMG. Many players don't like using LMGs in this game, but usually that's because they try to use them like an SMG or assault rifle, and that's really not what they're designed to do. That would be like using your star sign to explain particular personality traits, as opposed to its true purpose of pretending you have any semblance of compatibility with an attractive girl on Tinder who owns a $300 salt lamp. The intellectual way to use any LMG is to pre-fire long before you actually see your target and let go of the trigger long after they hit the floor. It doesn't even matter if the enemy team hears you coming or if the opposing player has the reaction speed of an Apple user explaining how much they need iMessage when you mention any other brand of phone. As soon as a single pixel of the enemy has been exposed, you're already going to be filling it with holes. This means as long as you have enough bullets, you can effectively have a beyond perfect reaction speed, as you'll be able to kill an enemy before your brain can even process that you've done so. Checkmate, professional Siege players. If there's anything to take away from this Blitz guide video, disguised as a Trojan horse, it would be the same as pretty much every other video I've made about Siege. This is a game about throwing unexpected variables at the other team before letting enemy players lose against themselves while attempting to beat your seemingly irrational strategies. Success in any video game, and indeed life itself, relies on your own belief to achieve your goals, and as soon as you make the enemy doubt this belief, you've already won the game. Subscribe for more content from what is now effectively a news network, but until next time, have fun and embrace the bullshit.
Shoot buddy, shoot buddy, shoot buddy. No, you!
Cameron!
You're not part of shoot gang.